Hello, I'm the Pirate Novelist, your captain through the rough seas of media, and this is a video response to one of my favorite YouTubers right now. Been floating around ideas for videos, and I watched a particular video middle of the week or so from Andy's Final Den. He did a response to another channel where he talked about 30 of his favorite metal album covers, and I thought that might be an interesting idea, but I'm going to make my own little twist on it. If you'd like to check out Andy's video, I will leave it in the description below, but I'm going to be going over 30 of my favorite album covers. This list is in no particular order, and it kind of leaves me open if I want to do a sequel video, but these are just 30 album covers that I happen to enjoy. So let's go ahead and get started, and the first one I'm going to start with is Paramore's Brand New Eyes. I think this is the perfect way to start this list. I absolutely love this cover. When I think back to favorite albums overall, Brand New Eyes is pretty high on that list, but the cover just, it strikes me as, the butterfly's wings ripped off, and it almost seems like it's under a microscope, or it's in like a picture frame of sorts. It's really interesting, and especially when you listen to the song Brick by Boy and Brick in the album, I think it's just interesting kind of overall in terms of the cover itself. And then we move on to in the same kind of vein, same artist, I also wanted to include Paramore's All We Know Is Falling. Those of you who are semi-longtime viewers of mine know that that is an album that I hold very dear to my heart, and when I finally grabbed that as my holiest grail, I was honestly very happy, and that album, along with Brand New Eyes and all of Paramore's albums, mean the world to me. But to me, that cover is just, for lack of a better term, iconic. It's very simple in the way it wants to display things. The Paramore, that font is just iconic to me. The couch is iconic to me, and really I've only seen them twice, and as much as I love their music, it's just that album to me, that cover is just, honestly, it's one of my absolute favorites, and that's why it's kind of on this list. Kind of in the same vein of a couple of albums that Andy talked about, I like albums that kind of always tell a story to it. Much the two that I showed earlier, the Paramore ones, yes, they're interesting, but I think there's a couple that kind of tell a story, and one that, to me, kind of exemplifies that is Led Zeppelin's In Through the Outdoor. I like this album a lot. I don't have it right on tap on vinyl. I'm going to get it eventually, but to me, this cover it just evokes a lot. There's a lot going on for me, and to me, it's just telling an interesting story, and it's a departure a little bit from what was really used to being heard, what you're used to hearing in terms of when you think of Led Zeppelin. But I love songs on this album like "A Fool in the Rain," "All of My Love," just classic songs. And I honestly, when I was thinking of this list, this was the very first album cover that happened to pop in my head. I couldn't go on this list without popping in Within Temptation. The first one is The Unforgiving. I love how stylized that album is, with the girl with the gun, and it really just tells this interesting story. And for me, it's all the little details that you happen to see when you kind of look at it, and you're just listening to the album, and just, when you have the album art in front of you, whether it be on your phone when you're listening to it, or the CD, or the record, it's one of those that, much like, In Through the Outdoor, it tells a story, which I find absolutely interesting. Another one from Within Temptation that I enjoy is The Heart of Everything. Within Temptation, I've talked to death about this band, but it's their album artwork is just as solid as their music, and I think that speaks volumes to just music in general, if that can be, done with that. And that's one reason why it makes this list, is those two I kind of equate with each other as being really interesting and really cool. Another one that I absolutely enjoy is Opeth's Morning Rise. It's black and white. It's striking. You have that building, and then underneath it you have the reflection of the building. And just for me, especially with the press that I have on vinyl, it's very interesting because it's white and gray. It's almost black and white. It really just, when I look at it, it just strikes me as interesting and different, and that's what I absolutely love about that. What I tried to do for this list was include all albums if I have it on digital, CD, or vinyl. What really I'm trying to do is not show you vinyl specifically for this, because this is based upon just the album artwork. So really I'm just going to be putting the artwork somewhere around here in this ether around me, but I just kind of wanted to take some time to talk about those favorite albums. Another album that I really enjoy, same band, Opeth Sorceress. Both Morning Rise and Sorceress kind of strike me as very interesting, and that's what I love, is if I can look at an album cover, look at the artwork and say, this is really interesting, like the one that's coming up in just a second that I'm going to be talking about, or Paramore, or any artist. If something really jumps out at me, I tend to really dig it, in a sense, if that makes sense. The next one I'm going to talk about is Nightwish's Imaginarium. Very, very good concept album. Nightwish is one of those bands that I really enjoy, but also find interesting that they have rotating lead singers. But Storytime, oh my gosh, that is one of my favorite all-time songs ever created. And just the concept overall really matches this interesting kind of like, I almost want to say carousel, theme park, all of that. And it really, when you listen to this album, the way it starts up, with the music box clicking, like you're turning it, it's really interesting. And this one just strikes out at me and just calls to me every single time I look at it. And I really just kind of enjoy the theming and everything behind it. Another one, well, really, another album I really talked to death about is Tonight Alive's Limitless. I honestly couldn't not put this on the list. Just it's so interesting to me, the hand and it, going over the globe and being kind of floating over the earth. It's just really this interesting concept to me overall with, what they were trying to do with it. I honestly couldn't not put on this list just because it's just one of those striking album covers. It's just one of those album covers that when I think back and when I was making this initial list, it was one that I knee-jerk thought of to put on the list. And next up is pretty much every single Volbeat album cover. I absolutely love it from beginning to end. The strength, the sound of the songs with the microphone I find interesting. Rock the Rebel, Metal the Devil with the stylus arm on the record, and it's just spinning and causing sparks. I absolutely love that. Guitar Gangsters and Cadillac Blood. Oh my gosh, that's iconic cover for me. Then you move on to Beyond Hell Above Heaven, and I've talked about this one when I showed it off. The spinning imagery with Mr. Cadillac and the angel on the cover, and then you have Outlaw Gentlemen and Shady Ladies, and then you go all through those where they're almost highly stylized. Like the first two albums were connected, the next two are connected, and then all of a sudden you had these connections going on. And it kind of snapped after Seal the Deal and Let's Boogie. I find every single one of these covers to be really stylized and very, very interesting. And that's why I love all of them. Another one that I really enjoy is Church's Every Open Eye. It's very interesting when I listen to this album. I get colors that I can physically, see when I listen to music. And for me, when I see certain things when I listen to music, the cover is really representative of how I feel about that album. And it's just so interesting with the flowers and the little pixel, not semi-pixel art, in a sense that it comes with that. And I always find that interesting when I look at it, to think, oh, this is different, this is interesting, this is all of that. And really that's what I thought when I was making this list, should encompass what some of my favorites are. And it's just when something strikes me, I have to talk about it. I couldn't go without mentioning Avenged Sevenfold, and one of my favorites currently right now is the stage. I am actually wearing my Avenged Sevenfold tour t-shirt, but when I was thinking to Tonight Alive Limitless, I had to go the other side of the coin and think the stage, Avenged Sevenfold, and with what they were doing with that album, that great concept, it matches absolutely perfectly with what they were trying to do, and it told a story. And much like that one told a story, I also thought Nightmare should be mentioned in this video because it's one of those interesting tells a story covers, and it was the very first album that I heard of theirs and got me really into their music. And yes, I know I got in past the Revs time, but I still respect the Revs so much. And to me, that those two albums kind of are indicative of why I love album artwork so much. Is they tell that interesting story, much like the Within Temptations that I talked about earlier, or the Volbeats. It's just so striking and different in terms of all the generic album covers out there. I couldn't not put Hailstorm on this list, and when I was thinking back to which one I thought was my favorite, I honestly had to go with The Strange Case of. It was borderline my first Hailstorm album, but it's honestly my favorite Hailstorm album. I love the new one, Into the Wildlife. I love their self-titled. But for me, when I think of Hailstorm, my knee-jerk reaction is Strange Case of. I don't know why, it's just that cover is so striking and different to me. Even when it's, the alternate version with the white coloring or the black coloring, to me that's just one of my favorite covers just because of how striking and different it was when I first saw it. Those who know me know I've worn In This Moment shirts every once in a while. I do love In This Moment. And one of my favorite covers of all time is In This Moment's Blood. Again, I throw this word around, it's iconic to me. It's so striking, different, but it's one of those iconic covers that I still feel I absolutely love it every single time I listen to Blood or take a look at it. When I think back to the times that I've seen them live with the Blood Girls and all that, how interesting and different it was when that album came out, and to me, it just really is indicative of, oh, so that's what you can do with album artwork and how you can be different and interesting with it. One of my favorites, I've shown this before, I felt the need to talk about it, and that's Polaris. Songs for the Adventures of Pete and Pete. I mean, if you look at that cover, it really is the constellation. And it's just so different and interesting, but to me, it's iconic and nostalgic at the same time. And honestly, I love that album to death. I play it a lot when I'm, just in the mood, just if I don't know what to listen to, I'll just put that on. And for me, always, seeing that cover makes me think of a simpler time, makes me think of childhood, and that's one reason why I put it on this list, is just because it's been one of my favorites most of my life. We get to talk about arguably one of my favorite all-time bands, and that's Pop Evil. When I thought of this list and I was going over a couple of things, I thought of two of their album covers, Onyx and War of Angels. Onyx to me is just classic. Again, like Blood, it tells just a mini story in itself. It's simple, but it's striking at the same time. And that's what I like about it. When it comes to War of Angels, that heart with all the intricacies and all the details that are in it are kind of like what I love about the Within Temptation that I talked about earlier. Striking and different, and there's a lot going on, kind of like In Through the Outdoor. And these two albums are kind of indicative of the two ways that I generally think of. Well, there are multiple ways when I look at records and their album covers, EPs, and all of that. But it's indicative of kind of the way I think. You could be simple with it, or you could be striking and interesting. And it's not necessarily a bad thing if it's simple. Some of the best ones are simple, like the Polaris one. But yeah, these two are just to me iconic and absolutely my favorites, and that's why I wanted to sit down and talk about those. Since starting this channel, I don't think I've ever talked about this band. If I have, it's very briefly in passing. But I initially thought of this one too when I was creating this list, and that's Seether's Holding On to Strings Better Left to Fray. I absolutely love the band Seether. I've only gotten to see them a couple of times, but every single time I've seen them, they've been absolutely fantastic. I actually got to meet them when they were playing what's called Lunatic Luau. It's a local festival here in Virginia, and I got this sign. I wanted to pull this out so I can show you real quick. I know we're talking about album covers, but I just wanted to show you that. I got this signed by the band, and I mean this cover, along with it being on the shirt here, this tour shirt, it's just absolutely, for me, it's iconic, it's different, it's indicative of what I love about album covers, and I still listen to that album to this day, and not a day goes by that I don't think that is easily within my top, just overall, digitally, sonically, albums. It's easily in my top 20. I know I didn't talk about that in my top 50 video, but I do not have that on vinyl, and that was my top 50 albums that I happen to own on vinyl. So until I actually get this one on vinyl, it's not technically in the running for that, but consider this one to be higher on the list. And this cover, just to me, is iconic. It's different, it's engaging, it's honestly everything I love about album covers is what you can do with them. And that's mainly why I put it here on the list. Now we move on to another favorite band of mine. I'm not going to bore you too long on this one, but it's the Pretty Reckless Going to Hell. To me, it's just one of those that screams iconic, different, interesting to me. And it's after seeing them a couple of times, 2 times, I'm always enthralled to see them live and what they're doing musically, and their thought process when they're creating the rock music. And for me, this album is just, this cover is iconic, and that's just not too much more I can say on that. I said it quite a bit. Iconic in a few of these, but to me, iconic is not necessarily a bad thing. Here's another one that I've talked about to death, but I still wanted to mention it. That is Red Sun Rising's Polyester Zeal. This album cover, along with the album, is amazing, but this album cover was strikingly different the first time I saw it, with their uses of red and orange, and what they were trying to go for, in terms of their debut album. And for me, it's one of those different and interesting ones that it just stands out. It's that pop of color that you happen to notice when you're watching or viewing it, when you're listening along or pulling it off the shelf or what have you. It was tough for me to choose, because we're getting close to the end here. It was very tough for me to choose between all the 3 Days Grace albums. I know I wanted to talk about at least one of them, and for me, that is Human. That album cover is interesting in design. It has those intricacies like the War of Angels, but it has that simplicity of onyx kind of melded together, and it creates a big picture, but you can still get the little intricacies in it. And when I got to see them at the Norva with Pop Evil, seeing the album cover in a giant, back display that was just cloth, and it was just so very interesting to see it larger, and you could see the little intricacies that they were going for, and that's one reason why I picked that particular one, was all those intricacies. I may talk about the other ones in a future video, but for now, if we see this as a standalone video, that's one that I had to put in. A couple more that are iconic to me and I feel the need to talk about are Allison Changes' Dirt and Allison Changes' The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here. Dirt, not much more to say other than iconic, and it's one of those that it's one of my favorite albums of all time. I didn't put it in my sloppy seconds because I feel that it is vastly superior to Facelift, and it has one of my favorite songs, if not my favorite song of all time, Rooster, on it. But it's just one of those interesting, on the bass line, it's just, the cracked dirt and all of that, but it has the interesting face on there, like it's trapped in the water, but it's really dirt. That just screams iconic to me. With all the intricacies and details, we switch to the simple, The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here with just the Triceratops head, and I found myself, when I was thinking about this, okay, so as everything kind of laid down, there was the really interesting and intricate one, and then the simple one to kind of contrast it. And I honestly don't know why I was thinking this way, but to me, it's just both these covers are very interesting and different, But it's just, I love the simpleness of the Devil Put Dinosaurs here. And when I found it first on vinyl, which I don't have because it's picture disc, the picture disc was really interesting with different colors and variations, what they could do with that. And thinking about all of that, that's just one reason why I think I put it in here, is just, it's honestly one of my favorites. When I'm listening to that and I pull it up, I'm like, this is a really cool album cover. The last two I ended on, and I hope I'm at 30. If not, I'll just say 30-ish. But the last couple I did want to talk about, they're, again, really simple ones. I'll do the simplest, I'll save the simplest for last, but one I did want to talk about was Adelita Sway, Self-Titled. If you know the bands, you know that they came up with their, I won't go too much into the story, but if you listen to their interviews, there's a very interesting way they came up with their name, and that cover is indicative of their story. So for me, just listening to music and knowing that story, it's just, I had to put it on the list just because it's one of my favorite album covers, but the story behind it is interesting too. And when something can tell a story and still be interesting and grab you and be different, then that's to me what's indicative of a really good album cover. I know I've talked to death already, but I have so many interesting facets of what I think is an interesting album cover, so don't mind me if I just happen to be rambling right now. The last one I wanted to talk about is Arctic Monkeys AM. This is arguably the simplest out of all the covers that I've chosen, but honestly, it's interesting, you know, them playing with radio waves and the thought of waves and what, you know, how sound travels and all of that, and what's indicative of music just in general. That to me is very interesting, and one that I thought needed to be on this list, and maybe even end the list with, in terms of, you know, what I think is very interesting about album covers. So that's pretty much it. You know, this is just a one-off that I thought was kind of interesting, and I wanted to just kind of throw my hat in the ring with my opinions. This does not mean that all the other albums that I own, you know, aren't my favorites. I wanted to pick out and choose a couple of my just overall favorite album covers. But for me, it was very interesting to take a look back at some of my all-time favorite albums and just talk about just one little aspect of them that I hadn't gotten to talk about before. If I didn't cover one of your favorites, again, it's my favorites, but let me know down below in the comments. I always love hearing, if you ever comment, I always love hearing your opinions, so just sound off in the comments and let me know some of your favorites. I'm very glad that I actually had the time to film this right now. I definitely have a few more video ideas coming, but until then, as I always say, when the waters get rough, keep on sailing.